As dawn broke over Naoka, the village was still, its people hesitant to breathe fully, as though not yet convinced that the nightmare was truly over. The land seemed to hum with a strange quiet, the kind that settles only after a storm has passed. Mama Nyar stood for a long time, her body trembling with exhaustion, her eyes fixed on the place where Adaugo had been swallowed by the earth. The ancient serpent had been vanquished, at least for now, but there was no celebration, no cheer. The villagers, many of whom had remained hidden during the battle, slowly emerged from their homes, their faces filled with confusion and awe. They had not seen the serpent, not truly witnessed the horror that had gripped their lives, but they knew something had happened. They knew that their world had been touched by something far older and darker than they could comprehend. The first to approach Mama Nyar was Okota's mother. Her face, once stricken with grief, was now calm, as if a great weight had been lifted. She reached out a trembling hand and placed it gently on Mama Nyar's shoulder. "The village owes you much, old woman," she said softly. Mama Nyar's eyes were heavy with the burden of what she had just done, but there was also a quiet pride in them. "It is not I who have saved you, but the land itself. The blood of the ancestors runs deep here, and it has remembered. It will always remember." Her voice, though weak, carried the weight of truth. "But remember this, the serpent was never truly gone. There are forces at work that none of us can fully understand. We must never forget what has happened. We must always honor the land, honor the spirits that dwell in it, for they are as old as time itself." Okota's mother nodded, her face lined with a wisdom that had not been there before. "We will remember, Mama Nyar. We will rebuild, and we will honor the land." The villagers gathered together, as they always had after a storm, to begin the quiet work of recovery. Yet, despite the promise of rebuilding, the scars remained. The air in Naoka was heavier now, thick with the knowledge that some forces, some shadows, could never truly be erased. As Mama Nyar turned to leave, her hand still on the sacred blade, she felt the earth beneath her feet tremble once again. It was faint, barely perceptible, but it was enough to remind her that the balance was delicate. Adaugo had been defeated, but the world was never free of its darker forces. The struggle would always continue. The question, as it had always been, was whether Naoka was strong enough to withstand the weight of the unseen. In the weeks that followed the battle, the village of Naoka tried to return to a sense of normalcy, though the memory of that night haunted them all. The children played more cautiously, no longer laughing as freely near the riverbanks or under the shadows of the towering trees. The elders, once proud and unyielding, now spoke in softer tones, their eyes always lingering on the horizon, as though waiting for something to emerge from the distance. Mama Nyar, despite the victory, withdrew into a quiet solitude. She no longer ventured to the heart of the village, preferring the silence of her hut, where she could listen to the whispers of the earth. There were things, she knew, that the people of Naoka would never understand, things that could not be spoken aloud. The village had been safe for now, but at what cost? Adaugo's defeat had been an act of ancient magic, a power that existed not in any one person, but in the land itself. Yet, the land was not a simple thing. It was vast, unyielding, and full of mysteries that no man or woman could fully comprehend. She had felt it beneath her feet, the tremor of something larger than the serpent, something that had been watching, waiting for the right moment to stir. The ground beneath her now seemed to hum with an energy that felt both ancient and uneasy. One evening, as the moon rose high and bright above the village, Mama Nyar ventured to the old fig tree once more. The tree, gnarled and twisted, stood as it always had, its branches reaching out like a web to hold the stars. Beneath its roots, she had once heard the whispers of the earth, but now there was a silence so deep that it seemed to press in on her chest. She knelt, placing her palm on the ground, listening. For a long while, there was nothing. Then, slowly, a voice reached her, a faint, familiar hiss, like a breeze carrying a memory from the past. "You think I am gone," the voice said, soft as the rustle of leaves. But I am never truly gone. The balance has only shifted, Mama Nyar. And you have made your choice. A chill ran through Mama Nyar's body, the voice of Adaugo now more insidious than before. The serpent's essence was not destroyed, it had merely retreated into the depths of the earth, waiting for the right moment to rise again. Mama Nyar closed her eyes, feeling the weight of what had been said. She had known, deep down, that the serpent's return had not been the end of the story. It was only a chapter. The earth was still alive, still holding secrets, still watching. And Adaugo was only one part of the great balance, one part of the ancient forces that shaped the world. I have made my choice, Mama Nyar whispered back to the darkness, her voice steady and strong. And I will not falter. The ground beneath her trembled once more, but this time it was different. It was not the tremor of fear, but the steady pulse of something ancient and powerful, a force of nature that would never be silenced. Mama Nyar stood, her heart resolute. She had no illusions about what lay ahead, but she knew one thing for certain: the battle between light and shadow was far from over, and the villagers of Nyar would need more than just magic to face the forces that lurked in the unseen corners of the world. As the seasons passed, the shadow of Adaugo's return lingered over Nyar like a cloud that refused to dissipate. The villagers went about their daily lives, but a palpable unease settled in their hearts. They had seen the serpent, or at least they had seen the remnants of her wrath, and they knew that she could return at any time. The stories, once whispered only in the dark corners of the village, now became the center of every conversation. The children, in particular, became restless, drawn to the riverbanks in the early morning hours, where the waters had always been calm and inviting. Yet, even the river had changed. The once serene flow of water now carried with it a sense of foreboding, a deep, undertow-like current that tugged at anyone who ventured too close. The elders gathered more often beneath the fig tree, and the crackling of their fires became a nightly ritual, a way to ward off the unknown. Mama Nyar remained at the edge of the village, her presence as steady as the old earth she had protected for so long. But there was no denying the weariness in her eyes. Each passing day seemed to add years to her already weathered face, as if the weight of the village's survival had settled deeper into her bones. She could feel the subtle stirrings of something beneath the ground, the quiet murmur of something watching, waiting. It wasn't Adaugo alone that worried her, but the shift in the land itself. Forces that had once been dormant, hidden away in the oldest parts of the earth, were now awakening. She knew that Akin was but one of many spirits tied to the land, creatures born from the ancient forces that govern the balance of nature. In her heart, Mama Nyar feared that more would come, more that were even darker, more dangerous than the serpent. One evening, as the wind howled through the village and the moon hung heavy in the sky, Mama Nyar walked to the river alone. She stood at its edge, staring into the water, feeling its cool pull against her feet. She could hear the faint whisper of a voice, not in the air, but in the depth of the river, calling to her. It was not Adaugo, but something older, something deeper. She closed her eyes, letting the sound of the river wash over her, and for the first time in many years, she felt the ancient magic stir within her. It was a power she had long since known, a power that ran through the very blood of the land, but it was different now. It had changed. The river was no longer just a source of life for Nyar. It had become a channel for something else. A darker, more primal force was beginning to surface. The whispers in the water grew louder, and Mama Nyar could feel it. The land was calling to her. The earth was restless, and its secrets were slowly being uncovered. The serpent was not the end. It was merely the beginning. In the days that followed, Mama Nyar found herself increasingly restless, her every step burdened by the whispers of the land. It was as if the earth itself was speaking to her, urging her to listen, to act before the darkness fully emerged. She no longer trusted the stillness of the village or the calm of the river. Each moment felt like a breath held too long, the world waiting for something terrible to unfold. The villagers, too, began to feel it. The old rhythms of life had shifted, and though they tried to ignore it, a deep unease had taken root in their hearts. The crops were withering strangely, the livestock becoming skittish, as though they too sensed the disturbance in the land. The once predictable patterns of rain and sunshine had faltered, the weather now erratic, as if nature itself had been thrown out of balance. Mama Nyar knew that the serpent's defeat had only been a temporary reprieve, a brief moment of calm in a much larger storm. She had fought the ancient magic before, but she knew now that it was not enough. She needed more than just the power of the sacred blade. She needed to call upon something deeper, something beyond the earth she had known. The spirits of the ancestors were restless, too, their voices carrying on the wind like a distant, mournful song. That night, Mama Nyar gathered the village's elders once more beneath the old fig tree. They sat in a circle, their faces lined with concern, their eyes darkened with the weight of the land's secrets. "It is not over," Mama Nyar began, her voice steady but filled with the gravity of the knowledge she had gained. "We have not seen the last of Adaugo, nor have we seen the last of the darkness that stirs beneath us. The serpent was only a harbinger, a sign of what is to come." The elders exchanged uneasy glances, but none spoke. They had long known that the land was not something to be taken lightly. It was a force unto itself, a power that could not be easily contained. "We must strengthen the bonds between us and the spirits of the land," Mama Nyar continued. "The balance has shifted, and if we do not act now, it will tip beyond our control. We must make offerings, perform rituals, call upon the powers that protect us before the darkness fully rises." A long silence followed her words, as the villagers considered what was being asked of them. Offering themselves to the spirits was not something done lightly, it was a deep commitment, one that required great sacrifice. But the alternative, as they all knew, was far worse. The night air grew colder, and the wind began to stir in the branches above. It carried with it an unsettling energy, as if the very land was listening to Mama Nyar's words. "We will do what must be done," the eldest elder, Chioma, said quietly. "But we must also be prepared. The land is not just our protector, it is our judge. The darkness that rises may have its own intentions." The elders nodded in agreement, their faces set with determination, but their eyes filled with a quiet dread. Mama Nyar knew the task ahead was not one they could face alone. They would need to call upon every bit of their strength, every ounce of ancient magic, to face what was coming. The serpent's legacy was only the beginning. A deeper, older force was stirring, and Nayoka would either stand together or fall. The balance of the land was fragile, and soon, the villagers would learn that some forces could not be controlled by ritual alone. The preparations began the very next day, as the villagers, led by Mama Nyar and the elders, gathered in the heart of Nayoka, beneath the towering fig tree. The air had grown thick with an energy that felt both alive and oppressive, as though the land itself was waiting for the rituals to begin. The first step was the offerings. The villagers gathered herbs, sacred flowers, and fruits, laying them out in carefully arranged patterns. They were not just symbols of sustenance, but a way to appease the spirits, both those that protected them and those that were far older, more unpredictable. The offerings were then placed in a circle around the base of the fig tree, where the ground was said to be the thinnest between the worlds. The villagers had not made such offerings in generations, not since the last great struggle with the forces of darkness. Yet, Mama Nyar knew that these rituals, though ancient, were necessary now. She stood at the center of the circle, her face set with resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the first stage of the ritual began. The elders chanted softly, their voices rising and falling like the breath of the earth itself. They called upon the spirits of the ancestors, their words flowing like a river through time, bridging the gap between the living and the dead. It was a deep, guttural sound, ancient and powerful, one that vibrated through the ground beneath their feet. The villagers stood still, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. The air seemed to pulse, charged with the energy of something unseen, something vast and untamable. But Mama Nyar's heart was steady. She could feel the ancient power stirring, responding to the call of the ritual. It was not the serpent's power, but something far older, something that had slumbered beneath the earth for countless generations. As the night deepened, a sudden gust of wind swept through the village, extinguishing the flames of their torches and sending the offerings scattering like leaves in a storm. For a moment, there was silence, a deep, suffocating quiet that pressed in on them from all sides. Then, from the darkness beyond the village, a voice rose, a voice that was familiar yet alien, warm yet cold. "You have called, Mama Nyar," the voice said, and it seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "But do you truly understand what you have awakened?" The ground beneath their feet rumbled, and the villagers recoiled, their hearts pounding in their chests. Mama Nyar stood tall, her face unwavering. She knew the voice. It was not the voice of Adaugo, nor the serpent, but something older, something tied to the very heart of Nyar. The force that had once ruled the land before the first man had set foot upon it. She took a step forward, her voice ringing out clear and strong. "I understand," she said, her words firm. "And I accept the responsibility of what comes next. The land is ours to protect, but we must also respect its power. We are its stewards, not its masters." The voice seemed to laugh, a sound that reverberated through the earth like the rumble of thunder. "Very well," it said, its tone both amused and resigned. "You have chosen your path, Mama Nyar. But remember this, the balance is delicate. And in the end, everything must return to the earth." As the voice faded into the wind, the ground settled, and the air grew still again. The villagers stood in stunned silence, unsure of what had just happened. But Mama Nyar knew that the ritual had not been completed yet. The land had responded, but there was more to be done. They had not yet earned the trust of the spirits, and the land's deeper secrets still remained hidden. She turned to the elders, her face grave. "The earth has spoken," she said, her voice low but resolute. "But this is only the beginning. We have awakened forces we cannot fully comprehend. We must prepare for whatever comes next." The elders nodded, their expressions sober. The battle was far from over. The serpent's legacy was but a fragment of a much greater struggle. Nyar had entered into a pact with the earth itself, and now, they would have to live with the consequences of their choices. The days that followed were filled with unease and uncertainty. The villagers of Nyar worked in quiet cooperation, maintaining their routines, but their eyes were always looking over their shoulders, as if expecting the earth to open up and swallow them whole at any moment. The crops, though not fully withered, grew sparse and weak. The animals that had once roamed freely now huddled together in the village's pens, their eyes wide with suspicion, as if they too could sense the shift in the land's energy. Mama Nyar spent more time near the fig tree, the heart of the village's spiritual energy, where she could listen to the whispers of the earth. The elders were with her often, their rituals continuing in an effort to regain the balance that had been disrupted. But no matter how hard they tried, it was clear that something had changed deep within the very core of the land. One evening, as Mama Nyar sat in quiet meditation beneath the fig tree, the air around her seemed to thicken, becoming almost tangible, as if it was full of static. She stood, her senses alert, and felt a familiar presence, the same presence that had spoken to her the night of the ritual. It was not an enemy, nor was it a friend, but something in between, a force that was neither benevolent nor malevolent, but deeply entwined with the fabric of the earth itself. She closed her eyes and stretched out her senses, feeling the vibrations in the soil beneath her feet. The land had not been calmed, it had only been roused. And in its wake, a new force had emerged. "You have awakened me," a voice, low and reverberating, said once again, cutting through the stillness. It was not a voice that came from one place or another but from everywhere, the wind, the trees, the earth itself. Mama Nyar's heart raced. The voice, while familiar, carried with it a weight of something far more ancient, more powerful than Adaugo's dark presence. You have stirred the depths of the earth, Mama Nyar, the voice continued, growing clearer with each passing word. And now you must face the consequences of your actions. Mama Nyar inhaled sharply, steeling herself for the words that she feared. What is it you seek? She asked, her voice strong, though her insides quivered with unease. Balance, child, the voice rumbled. Balance is the eternal truth of the land. The serpent you defeated was but a manifestation of one of the forces that shaped this world. But there are others. Many others. Mama Nyar's eyes narrowed as she realized the gravity of the voice's message. This force was not just speaking of Adaugo, it was speaking of the many ancient forces, of spirits and entities that had long existed before the rise of the village. The serpent had been a fragment, a single thread in the vast tapestry of the earth's energies. What must we do? Mama Nyar asked, a bead of sweat forming on her brow. What must we do to restore the balance? There was a long pause, the kind of silence that hung in the air like a heavy fog. When the voice finally spoke again, it was slow, deliberate, and filled with a chilling finality. You must journey to the heart of the earth, to the place where the forces first collided, the source of the land's power. There, you will face the true challenge. If you fail, the land will fall into chaos, and your village will be lost forever. Mama Nyar stood motionless, the weight of the voice's words pressing down on her chest. She knew that this was no ordinary task, no simple ritual. The journey to the heart of the earth would be perilous, fraught with dangers beyond her comprehension. Yet, she had no choice. She had already awakened the ancient forces, and now she had to face them head-on. She had been entrusted with the village's survival, and the land's fate was now in her hands. I will go, she said finally, her voice unwavering. I will go, and I will restore the balance. The voice did not respond immediately. But after a moment, a low rumble of approval echoed through the air. Then prepare yourself, Mama Nyar, the voice intoned, for the path you must walk is not one of light. It is a path forged in shadow and rooted in the deepest parts of the earth. But remember, child, the balance can only be restored when the earth has been made whole again. With that, the voice faded into the earth, leaving Mama Nyar standing alone beneath the ancient tree, her heart heavy with the knowledge of what lay ahead. The village of Nyoka would have to carry on without her for a time. She would not be able to protect them if she failed. But she would not fail. Not this time. As the night deepened and the stars twinkled overhead, Mama Nyar felt the weight of her decision settle into her bones. The time had come to journey into the heart of the earth, and to face whatever ancient powers lay waiting there. The following morning, Mama Nyar set out alone from the village. The elders and the villagers offered their blessings, though none could fully understand the weight of the journey she was about to undertake. The air was thick with an uneasy tension, and the villagers stood by the village borders, watching her recede into the mist that clung to the hills like a veil. She did not look back. Her path led her toward the dark, untouched part of the forest, where few dared to venture. This was the heart of the land, the sacred, hidden places where the boundaries between the world of men and the world of spirits grew thin. The forest had always been a source of mystery, a place where even the most seasoned hunters dared not tread. The further she walked, the more the forest seemed to close in around her, the trees towering like silent sentinels, their branches twisted and gnawed, as though they had seen the passage of time itself. She could feel the pulse of the land beneath her feet, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through her bones. The air grew heavy with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves, but there was something else there, something more, a presence she could not yet name. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she became keenly aware of the silence. There were no birds singing, no animals scurrying through the underbrush. The very forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. She pressed on, the weight of the earth's power growing stronger with every step. Eventually, the forest gave way to a vast chasm, a deep fissure in the earth that seemed to stretch for miles. It was here that the ancient forces converged, where the energy of the land met the sky in a violent, raw collision. Mama Nyar approached the edge of the chasm, her eyes scanning the deep darkness below. She could feel the heat rising from it, a warmth that seemed unnatural in the cool, damp air. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and she could hear the faintest rumble, as if the earth itself was whispering to her. She knelt at the edge of the chasm, her breath steady as she closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into the pulse of the land. The air around her thickened once more, and she could hear a voice, the same voice that had spoken to her before, deep and resonant, but now filled with a quiet fury. "You have come," the voice said, echoing through the chasm. "You seek to restore balance, to right what has been broken. But know this, Mama Nyar, the forces you awaken do not serve you. They are not bound to your will. They are as old as the earth itself, and their ways are beyond your understanding." She stood and faced the chasm, her heart heavy with the weight of the voice's words. "I do not seek to control them," she replied firmly, her voice unwavering. "I seek only to restore what was lost, to return the land to its rightful balance. I know the cost." The voice seemed to hesitate, and for a moment, the earth beneath her feet stilled. "You are not the first to walk this path, Mama Nyar," the voice said slowly. "Others have come before you, with similar intentions. But they were undone by the very power they sought to harness. The land does not forgive those who seek to change its course. It takes what it is owed." Mama Nyar felt a chill run through her, but her resolve did not falter. "I have no illusions about what lies ahead," she said. "But I will not turn back. The village of Nyoka depends on me, and I will do what must be done." A low growl rumbled through the earth, as though the land itself were warning her. But the voice did not speak again. The silence that followed was oppressive, stretching out like a great void, as if the earth was waiting to see what she would do next. With a steady breath, Mama Nyar stepped forward, her foot finding purchase on the rocky edge of the chasm. She could feel the heat rising from within, the pulse of the earth's energy calling to her. The journey to the heart of the earth had begun, and she could not afford to hesitate now. She had awakened the ancient forces, and now she had to face them head-on. The true challenge lay before her. The balance of the land rested on her shoulders, and she could feel the weight of it with every step she took into the unknown depths. The land was not a forgiving place, and Mama Nyar knew that the price of restoring balance could very well be her own life. But she would pay it, if it meant the survival of Nyoka. The journey into the chasm was fraught with danger, and the path ahead was unclear. But Mama Nyar was no stranger to fear. She had faced Adaugo, she had faced the serpent, and now, she would face whatever ancient force lay waiting at the heart of the earth. As Mama Nyar descended into the chasm, the very air seemed to shift around her. The ground beneath her feet was jagged, treacherous, as though it resented her presence, but she pressed on, her eyes scanning the darkness ahead. The deeper she went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. It was as if she were entering the very belly of the earth, a place where the forces of nature were born, where time had no meaning, and the very fabric of reality seemed to bend. The air was thick with heat, and the walls of the chasm radiated an ancient energy that made her skin crawl. She could hear the distant sounds of rumbling, the deep groans of the earth shifting and moving as if alive, but there was no turning back now. She was committed to this journey, whatever the cost. After what felt like hours, the narrow passage widened into a vast underground cavern, stretching farther than her eyes could see. The ceiling arched high above, filled with massive stalactites that glistened like teeth in the dim light. The ground was uneven, covered in sharp rocks and strange, glowing moss that illuminated the space with an eerie, unearthly glow. In the center of the cavern stood a massive stone altar, dark and ancient, covered in layers of moss and vine. It was a place of power, a nexus where the forces of the earth converged. The very energy of the cavern pulsed around her, swirling in the air like a living thing. Mama Nyar's heart pounded in her chest as she approached the altar, her senses heightened. It was here, she knew, that the ancient forces lay dormant, waiting for someone to awaken them. She could feel their presence, pressing against her like a weight, testing her resolve. "I have come," she said aloud, her voice steady despite the tremor of fear that clung to her bones. "I seek to restore the balance of the earth, to heal the land that has been fractured. I ask for your help." Her words echoed in the cavern, but the silence that followed was suffocating. There was no response, only the low rumble of the earth beneath her feet, as though it was considering her plea. She stepped forward and placed her hands on the cold stone altar, the ancient energy coursing through her as if the very earth were testing her strength. She closed her eyes, letting the power of the cavern fill her, her mind clearing as she sought to connect with the deep forces that resided here. For a moment, there was nothing but the rhythm of her breath and the steady pulse of the earth's energy. Then the voice returned, but this time, it was not from the chasm. It was not from the air, but from the very ground itself, vibrating through her body. "You have come, Mama Nyar," the voice rumbled, deep and resonant, its tone now heavy with both power and caution. "But you do not understand the weight of what you ask. You seek to restore what was once broken, but know this, some fractures cannot be healed. Some pieces of the land have been lost to time. They are beyond repair, beyond even your reach." Mama Nyar's heart tightened in her chest, but her resolve did not waver. "I understand the cost," she said, her voice firm. "But I will not let this land fall into ruin. The village of Nyoka depends on me, and I will do what must be done." The voice seemed to pause, considering her words. Then, with a deep sigh that shook the very air around her, it spoke again. "Very well," it said, the words heavy with both finality and warning. "You have chosen your path. But be warned, the forces you awaken are not bound to your will. They are as old as the earth itself, and they will not be controlled. To restore balance, you must face them on their terms. To heal the land, you must be willing to sacrifice more than you know. Are you prepared to pay the price?" Mama Nyar felt a chill run through her, but she did not hesitate. "I am ready," she said, her voice resolute, her heart steady despite the weight of the decision before her. The ground beneath her trembled once more, and the air grew heavy with the sound of distant thunder. The cavern seemed to pulse with energy, as if the earth itself was awakening from a long slumber. Slowly, the stone altar began to shift, its surface crackling with ancient magic. A brilliant light, bright and blinding, erupted from the center of the altar, illuminating the entire cavern. Mama Nyar stood her ground, her eyes wide as the light enveloped her. She could feel the energy of the land pouring into her, flooding her body with power. It was overwhelming, consuming, but she embraced it. She could hear the whispers of the earth, the voices of the spirits that had shaped the land for millennia. The energy swirled around her, crackling with raw power, and she knew, deep in her soul, that the balance was being restored. But at what cost? The light grew brighter, and the earth beneath her feet began to shake violently. She could feel her body being pulled in different directions, as if the very forces of nature were at war within her. The land was calling for its price, and Mama Nyar could only brace herself, knowing that the true test was yet to come. The violent tremor of the earth beneath Mama Nyar's feet grew stronger, more erratic, as if the very core of the world was in turmoil. She felt as though her body was being torn apart, pulled in every direction by unseen hands. The power that coursed through her was beyond anything she had ever experienced, a raw, unfiltered force of nature. Her mind struggled to keep up with the overwhelming surge of energy that flooded her senses, blurring the lines between herself and the earth. The whispers of the spirits grew louder, their voices a cacophony of ancient knowledge and sorrow, blending into one continuous hum that reverberated through her bones. It was as though the land itself was alive, and it was speaking to her, telling her stories of long-forgotten times, of battles fought and lost, of sacrifices made and promises broken. She could feel the weight of these ancient memories pressing down on her, suffocating her. But she fought to stay grounded. She could not lose herself in this flood of power. Not now. The energy surged again, more intense than before, and for a moment, Mama Nyar was blinded by the light that exploded from the stone altar. Her body shook, every muscle straining under the immense pressure, but she held firm, standing tall despite the odds. Her fingers dug into the altar, and for a brief second, she thought she felt the pulse of a heartbeat, an ancient, primal beat that matched her own. "I accept the cost," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the thunderous sounds that echoed through the cavern. "I accept whatever is required of me." The ground beneath her trembled violently, and suddenly, the energy that had been flooding her body seemed to condense into one single, overwhelming point of power. She felt as if she were at the very center of the earth, at the nexus of all life and all death. A dark, oppressive force pressed in on her, testing her resolve. The air was thick with the smell of earth and smoke, and she felt the heat of the chasm radiating against her skin. And then, the voice returned. It was no longer the deep, resonant voice from before, but something more ancient, something more primal, filled with both fury and sorrow. "You seek balance, Mama Nyar," it rumbled, its voice shaking the walls of the cavern. "But balance requires sacrifice. To heal the land, you must sever a part of yourself. You must be willing to give up something precious, something that is bound to your very soul. What will you sacrifice?" Mama Nyar closed her eyes, her mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. She knew that this was the true test, the moment where the cost of her journey would become clear. She had been warned, but she had pressed on regardless. The weight of the decision bore down on her, but she knew she could not turn back now. The village, the land, the people she loved, everything depended on her. She could not fail them. "I will sacrifice what is necessary," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "If it means the land will heal, if it means Nayoka will survive, I will give what is required." The voice seemed to pause, as though considering her words. Then, with a final, heavy sigh, it spoke again. "Very well. You have chosen. But know this, Mama Nyar, there is no coming back from this. The land will heal, but you will not be the same. What you give, you will lose forever. And when the balance is restored, you will be but a shadow of the person you once were." The ground beneath her feet began to shift violently once more, and the cavern was filled with the sound of cracking stone and howling winds. The air was thick with the energy of the earth, and Mama Nyar could feel the power that had once coursed through her beginning to drain away. It was as though the earth was claiming her very essence, consuming it to restore the land. She felt her strength waning, the world around her growing dim. She could no longer feel her body as she once had, and the overwhelming sensation of loss began to creep into her mind. It was as though something deep inside her was being severed, ripped away, leaving an emptiness in its wake. She knew then that the sacrifice had begun. Her heart thundered in her chest, but she knew that she had made the right choice. She could feel the earth responding, the balance beginning to shift as the land healed and restored itself. The energy around her began to settle, and slowly, the violent shaking of the cavern subsided. The air grew still, and the intense heat that had filled the chasm began to dissipate. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the cavern was silent. But Mama Nyar could feel it, deep beneath the surface of the earth, something had changed. The land was healing. The balance had been restored. As the light from the altar dimmed, Mama Nyar sank to her knees, exhaustion sweeping over her like a tidal wave. She could feel the weight of the sacrifice pressing down on her, the part of herself that had been severed, lost forever. Her body trembled, but her heart was steady. She had done what needed to be done. The earth had claimed its price. And now, Nayoka would be safe. The following morning, Mama Nyar set out alone from the village. The elders and the villagers offered their blessings, though none could fully understand the weight of the journey she was about to undertake. The air was thick with an uneasy tension, and the villagers stood by the village borders, watching her recede into the mist that clung to the hills like a veil. She did not look back. Her path led her toward the dark, untouched part of the forest, where few dared to venture. This was the heart of the land, the sacred, hidden places where the boundaries between the world of men and the world of spirits grew thin. The forest had always been a source of mystery, a place where even the most seasoned hunters dared not tread. The further she walked, the more the forest seemed to close in around her, the trees towering like silent sentinels, their branches twisted and gnawed, as though they had seen the passage of time itself. She could feel the pulse of the land beneath her feet, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated through her bones. The air grew heavy with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves, but there was something else there, something more, a presence she could not yet name. As she ventured deeper into the forest, she became keenly aware of the silence. There were no birds singing, no animals scurrying through the underbrush. The very forest seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for something to unfold. She pressed on, the weight of the earth's power growing stronger with every step. Eventually, the forest gave way to a vast chasm, a deep fissure in the earth that seemed to stretch for miles. It was here that the ancient forces converged, where the energy of the land met the sky in a violent, raw collision. Mama Nyar approached the edge of the chasm, her eyes scanning the deep darkness below. She could feel the heat rising from it, a warmth that seemed unnatural in the cool, damp air. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and she could hear the faintest rumble, as if the earth itself was whispering to her. She knelt at the edge of the chasm, her breath steady as she closed her eyes, allowing herself to sink into the pulse of the land. The air around her thickened once more, and she could hear a voice, the same voice that had spoken to her before, deep and resonant, but now filled with a quiet fury. "You have come," the voice said, echoing through the chasm. "You seek to restore balance, to right what has been broken. But know this, Mama Nyar, the forces you awaken do not serve you. They are not bound to your will. They are as old as the earth itself, and their ways are beyond your understanding." She stood and faced the chasm, her heart heavy with the weight of the voice's words. "I do not seek to control them," she replied firmly, her voice unwavering. "I seek only to restore what was lost, to return the land to its rightful balance. I know the cost." The voice seemed to hesitate, and for a moment, the earth beneath her feet stilled. "You are not the first to walk this path, Mama Nyar," the voice said slowly. "Others have come before you, with similar intentions. But they were undone by the very power they sought to harness. The land does not forgive those who seek to change its course. It takes what it is owed." Mama Nyar felt a chill run through her, but her resolve did not falter. "I have no illusions about what lies ahead," she said. "But I will not turn back. The village of Nyoka depends on me, and I will do what must be done." A low growl rumbled through the earth, as though the land itself were warning her. But the voice did not speak again. The silence that followed was oppressive, stretching out like a great void, as if the earth was waiting to see what she would do next. With a steady breath, Mama Nyar stepped forward, her foot finding purchase on the rocky edge of the chasm. She could feel the heat rising from within, the pulse of the earth's energy calling to her. The journey to the heart of the earth had begun, and she could not afford to hesitate now. She had awakened the ancient forces, and now she had to face them head-on. The true challenge lay before her. The balance of the land rested on her shoulders, and she could feel the weight of it with every step she took into the unknown depths. The land was not a forgiving place, and Mama Nyar knew that the price of restoring balance could very well be her own life. But she would pay it, if it meant the survival of Nyoka. The journey into the chasm was fraught with danger, and the path ahead was unclear. But Mama Nyar was no stranger to fear. She had faced Adaugo, she had faced the serpent, and now, she would face whatever ancient force lay waiting at the heart of the earth.